Um, so today is Texas Sea Grant's 50th anniversary. We're celebrating about half a century of supporting science and stewardship on the Texas coast by funding coastal and marine research and bringing data-driven resources to coastal communities through our coastwide extension program. Today, we have a panel of three longtime extension agents who I'll let introduce themselves here in a minute. We're going to be talking about some of their favorite memories from working with Texas Sea Grant and discuss some current projects they may be working on. We'll also have a fun little segment at the end where we'll have each agent explain what's going on in a photo we have of them. And of course, we'll hopefully have time for some audience Q&A at the end. My name is Corley Ann Parker. I'm a communication specialist with Texas Sea Grant for some clarification. So I'll be kind of moderating the panel as we go. So without any further ado, I'll let each agent introduce themselves. So I'll start alphabetically. John, if you want to start, just tell us who you are, what you do with Sea Grant, maybe some of the current projects you're working on.
I'm John O'Connell. I'm a coastal and marine resources agent in Brazoria County. And I've been with Texas Sea Grant or with Sea Grant since about 1994. I have multiple projects that I'm working on, but one of the ones that I wanted to spend a little time about was that I'm an advisor to the Cradle of Texas Master Naturalist program, which is really a great group of volunteers. Also am coordinating the Texas monofilament recovery and recycling program for the state. And that started back in 2004. That's a volunteer driven program to remove used fishing line from the environment. One of the new projects that I've recently started is Water Wednesdays, which unfortunately I had to postpone the very first one that was scheduled for the 15th, but that's been rescheduled for the 22nd. And that is to increase public awareness of issues affecting Texas water and the challenges that the state of Texas faces with water resources. That's some of the projects I'm working on currently.
Awesome. And then Julie, if you'd like to go next.
Well, my name is Julie Massey, and I'm also a coastal marine resource agent in the Galveston County area. And like John, I get to work with those amazing Texas Master Naturalist volunteers. And the volunteers that I get to work with are involved in, as all Master Naturalist volunteers, involved in numerous projects. But some of the things that they've been doing recently, which they are really excited about, are working with sea turtles with the Gulf Center for Sea Turtle Research at A&M Galveston, where they're doing husbandry as well as research on sea turtles, working with researchers from across the Gulf, and they're also involved in rescue and recovery of sea turtles, as well as sea turtle patrols. So in addition to the habitat restoration projects and the environmental education that they do, they have a Beach Heroes program, which is to introduce kids to marine debris and to come up with their own ideas as to how to address marine debris. And they illustrate that in artwork that has been displayed in whether it be an art gallery or at their school. So the Beach Heroes, everybody wants to be a beach hero to take care of our coastal beaches. And so that's been a great program. And then finally, I get to work with I get to host for Texas Sea Grant the Dolphin Challenge, which is the National Ocean Sciences Bowl Quiz Bowl for Texas. And so we have students from across the state as well as outside states, Arkansas or Mississippi, who join us. And it's a fast-paced, high-energy, sweat on your brow kind of competition where the kids show their knowledge of ocean sciences as they compete. And then the winner gets to go on to the national competition. We also, in that competition, choose a a Ralph Rayburn sportsmanship award. And I have to tell you, some of the teams are getting that sportsmanship award is the same as if they won the whole contest. So anyway, it's been a great opportunity to work for Texas Sea Grant, and but that's just some of the things that we're getting to do right now. So thank you.
Thank you. That's so great. Tony, you want to go?
Hi, I'm Tony Reisinger, and I'm the County Marine Extension Agent for Cameron County, the southern tip of Texas. And I've been with Texas Sea Grant for longer than I want to remember, 39 years. I'm on my 40th now. And I've really enjoyed it. Like John and Julie, I have Master Naturalist chapters too. I have 2 Master Naturalist chapters, the Rio Grande Valley chapter and the South Texas border chapter. And we have like 500 volunteers combined in both of those chapters. So it keeps me fairly busy. In addition to that, I also have a group called the Texas Coastal Naturalists, and they do things like red tide sampling. They rescue turtles like during the recent freeze. They respond to marine mammal strandings. They do a lot of different volunteer efforts. They also work with Sea Turtle Inc. and go up the beach and look for sea turtle nests. They do numerous things. I also teach them fish printing. I've got a fish print right here that you can see. It's a snook that we did like back in the 80s. I've done it for a long time, and I love to teach it to them. And they really enjoy doing that. In addition, I have 2 new projects. One is called Every Beach, Every Day, and it's a grant that we got from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And we are going to be able, if we have a red tide, to be able to tell people when and where they can go to the beach and not experience the aerosol that the red tide produces. And that's going to be an interesting project. We just cranked up on it this month, and we'll see. Hopefully we won't get a red tide, but we could. I also have another project that I'm involved with called Better Birds, or Better Bycatch Reduction Devices. And our fisheries specialist, Laura Piccarello, is running the project pretty much. And we are going to try to find better bycatch reduction devices to put aboard shrimp vessels. And that's, right now it's just a 3-year project, but it could extend up to 6 years. And that's just a few of the things that I do.
That's awesome. You all have just such amazing projects you've been working on. So getting into some of the main questions, how did you get started at Sea Grant? How did each of y'all get started at Texas Sea Grant?
John?
So how did I get started? Well, I got started with Texas Sea Grant, actually with Sea Grant, when I accepted a position in Louisiana as a 4-H / Marine agent. It was it was the first position where they combined 4-H with marine science. And so that was my primary duty, was to work with youth, 4-H youth, and also youth across the state of Louisiana in teaching marine science. And of course, I also worked with adults as well. And I spent about 2 years in Louisiana before I had a chance to move back to Texas and start a position here in Texas. But that's how I got started. Now, in preparation for my move to Louisiana, because of the time I went, I have to admit that I was still kind of naive about some of the issues that were going on in the fisheries community, and actually started my role in Louisiana during the gillnet ban. but I sought out Gary Graham, who's our former and now retired fishery specialist, to get a crash course in turtle excluder devices and bycatch reduction. And so I met with Gary up at the Texas Sea Grant headquarters. At that time, it was on Briarcrest Road in Bryan, and he gave me a crash course and all that. But that's just one of the nice things about working within that Sea Grant network, is being able to draw on those resources and years of experience.
That's great. That's awesome. Julie, do you want to go?
Sure. Well, I worked for another agency, Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I worked with a man who was in this position, Mel Russell, on a couple of projects. And I was very interested in going more into marine education. So when Mel took another position and I saw his position open up, I decided to go for it. And I was really happy to be chosen. I didn't realize at the time that I was the first female marine agent. So my brothers in the marine agent world embraced me and welcomed me, and with Mel really showed me the ropes, like John was talking about, having people with the experience, introduce you to the people that you need to know, talk to you about the issues that you're going to face and that the community is facing. Being able to tap into that wealth of knowledge as well as experience and connections really made the transition, because I came from a regulatory kind of background. So, and all of a sudden I was working with the fishermen, whereas before had been working in more regulatory. So it was really great, and I really appreciate the fact that I had the opportunity to work with those agents and specialists, and that they really create a path for me to have a success, be a success in the role. They always were very supportive, and without that, I think it would have been a much tougher road for me. But I really appreciated it. So that's how I came to Sea Grant. I thought I'd be here for 3 years, and it's been 29. So anyway, you never know how long a good thing is going to last, but I'm thankful it still is a great opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Tony, you gonna go?
Sure. Well, I started working with Sea Grant in the, I guess, late 1970s. A gentleman named Dave Harrington with the University of Georgia Sea Grant program was working in fisheries, and I had a lot of interaction with Georgia Sea Grant as I was working as a young marine biologist for the state of Georgia. And I learned a lot from him. And they mentioned Gary Graham earlier. John mentioned Gary Graham. Well, Gary and I were at a meeting in Florida, and he said, "We have an opening in Brownsville, Texas." And I flew over to Texas, took a look, liked it. They offered me a job, and I took it. And I moved my family out to Texas, and I haven't really looked back since then. It's been an interesting trip, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
That's so cool. I think it's really awesome how everybody has their own unique way of coming to Sea Grant and getting involved. On that note, all three of you have had quite a number of projects over the years. What have been some of your most memorable projects, or maybe one project that's been most memorable for you?
Well, I sat here and I have multiple projects, but I will try to condense them down to a couple three. One was actually seeing Michelle Haggerty, the state coordinator for the Master Naturalist program, give a talk at Sea Center, Texas. I drove up to Missouri County, or in that case, it was Lake Jackson, and she was talking about this volunteer program. And I immediately was hooked and went back to Calhoun County, which is where I started. Actually, I was supposed to start in Aransas County, but they filled the position in both Calhoun and Aransas and asked me if I'd go to Calhoun instead of Aransas, and I did. But anyway, I saw that as an opportunity to build a program, a robust program using volunteers. And so I went back to the county and started working with the steering committee, people that were already interested in getting that program up and running. And it was exciting because the Mid-Coast chapter was the 5th Master Naturalist chapter created in the state. And then from that, I was invited to be on the state advisory committee. And then we even held national meetings to promote the Master Naturalist program to other states across the United States. And so we actually spread that program that way. And then, of course, it was actually really fun to plan the first state meeting with Michelle Haggerty and the rest of the committee. So those were some of the early days of that Master Naturalist program. They now have over 40 something chapters across the state, and it's a very robust program. The other thing that was really exciting for me was my background is in fisheries management and aquaculture, but when I had some part of things that we do in extension work is working with individuals in the community to improve their lives. And I was contacted by some bait dealers that were having problems keeping their bait alive, and then using my knowledge of aquaculture and animal husbandry, if you will, help them actually become very successful, whereas they were losing 80% of their bait overnight. And we reduced that mortality or death of their bait to about 5%, less than 5%. And I ended up going up and down the coast doing these live bait seminars in different counties, working with my Sea Grant colleagues across the coast. So that was pretty excited. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention getting involved in the monofilament recovery and recycling program, where I was invited to, I volunteered to help a school out in Port Aransas and work with the students to start addressing used fishing line at the South Jetties in Port Aransas. And from there, that program has grown into it's been robust. It's been going on since, as I said, since 2004. And I've actually helped other states get their program started. I guess the most recent was a lady in Arkansas that contacted me wanting to start a program in Arkansas. So that's kind of rewarding. So those are some of the interesting past projects I've worked on.
Those are great. I'll try to link some sources to the monofilament project in the chat too for everybody. Julie, do you want to go next?
Sure. Well, I wanted to just say this, that one of the really kind of cool things about being with Sea Grant and having amazing agents and specialists to work with is, like, John's monofilament project has become a huge project for the Master Naturalists in the Galveston Bay area. And so, it's this sharing of the ideas and the opportunities to make an impact on our environment that really, I think it energizes and excites people about the opportunities that they have to change what's going on in the marine environment by their actions. So some of the older projects that I got to work on, one was it was called Potty Training Boaters on Galveston Bay. And at the time, there were very few pump out stations on the bay. Actually, there were only 3. This was in the probably mid 90s. And so we worked with a new company that was a pump out company, as well as GLO and the marinas with the Marine Association of Texas, to start educating boaters about using pump out stations and then getting the pump out stations installed. It was a really an interesting project. I did not know a lot about boat sewage, and I became pretty expert in it. And I kind of knew what people should do on their boats to take care of sewage. And my dad, when I was telling him about the project, he was kind of like, "I'm so proud of you that this is what you're working on." And I think he was a little puzzled by it, but that I had, but it was making an impact on water quality in areas where boats, and many people, what we found is they did not know what the rules were as far as discharge of sewage from their boats. So we work with the marinas, the General Land Office, got some funds, and to install pump out stations and up and down the Galveston Bay waterways. And we went from 3 pump out stations to over 20 within a very short time, and then educated the boaters on using those pump out stations. And developed, I was working with illustrators to try to illustrate getting people to use pump out stations, as well as working with boaters on educating them on how to use pump out stations. So that was a really, and then as a result of that, once we got enough pump out stations established on Clear Lake became the first tidally influenced waterway in Texas that was designated as zero discharge of sewage from boats. So that was a big success for us, to go from a place where discharge from sewage from boats was fairly common to one where zero discharge was the standard. So that was an interesting project, and I really enjoyed it. Met a lot of neat people, work with unique people through it. That's one of the opportunities that we get in Sea Grant, is you get to work with some really amazing people and often very unique people. Another project was the Galveston Bay Yards and Neighbors, which was basically connecting people and what's happening in their yards with the local waterways, whether it be the ditch in front of their house, or the creek or bayou that runs through their neighborhood, all the way to Galveston Bay. And teaching people that what they do in their yards has a big impact on our waterways and on Galveston Bay and our marine environment. I think that a lot of the work that Sea Grant does empowers people to do things differently, to understand their impact so they can make change and then implement that. And people oftentimes don't know what the right thing to do is, or don't understand their connections. So when we can connect people to the natural resources and the marine environment, and all of a sudden they have ownership of those environments and the actions that they take. So that was another great project. I got to do that with colleagues, from all the way from our horticulture agents to, turf grass specialists, and all the way down to water quality specialists, getting them all involved and then connecting them with our communities. So the communities and the people of the communities could understand how they can make a big difference on runoff that goes from their streets and yards into Galveston Bay in my area, but into any of our waterways. So those are some of my older projects that I got to work on, that I still use a lot of the connections and the information in the work that we do today. Thanks.
That's awesome. Tony, do you want to go next?
Sure. One of the, I guess I mentioned earlier that I've worked with Bycatch, and I've worked with Bycatch since I was a young man, a teenager. We made a gill net. We were in Alaska, and the first Bycatch we had was a seal pup. And it it kind of tore my heart out seeing that, but it got utilized. I had some what they call mucklucks made from it, some nice warm sealskin boots, and the rest of the animal went to some of the local natives, and they rendered seal oil out of it and used that. So it was interesting to see how bycatch was used, but it was a jolting experience for me. And when I was a young biologist, I worked with some of the Georgia Sea Grant people. I mentioned Dave Harrington earlier. Well, he was working with the National Marine Fisheries Service to try to develop a turtle excluder device. And some of the first devices they tried were barriers in the front of the net made out of webbing. They worked fairly good, but they had a lot of loss for their catches. So they moved on, and the National Marine Fisheries Service developed a larger device. And about that time, I was hired by Georgia Sea Grant, and a guy from Darien, Georgia, that I'd worked with at the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, his name was Sinky Boone. He developed a turtle excluder device that was a lot lighter and more efficient than the one that the National Marine Fisheries Service had developed. And he was a fisherman, and he had used a device similar. The reason he got that idea for that device was they catch what they call jelly balls. It's a jellyfish of the genus Stumolophus, or cannonballs they're also called. And they load up on them when they're fishing off the coast of Georgia. And he had used a device that had parallel bars in it that would actually push the jellyfish out through a slit in the net, and they wouldn't catch that many of them. So that was the first bycatch device that I was exposed to. And he further developed that to develop the first turtle excluder device by fishermen called the Georgia Jumper. And that evolved over time to other devices. One of them was the Matagorda TED that I got to go test when I started working for Texas A&M Sea Grant. Got to test it off of Cape Canaveral, and it worked. They were hibernating. I guess they were hibernating. Dr. Plotkin would probably know, but they were sea turtles that were in the Cape Canaveral Channel, loggerheads. And we would pull one side of the boat, we would pull a turtle excluder device, or TED. And on the other side of the boat, we would just have a bare net, and that was it. And we would catch sea turtles with the bare net, but with the turtle excluder devices that we used, we seldom would catch a turtle. I think I saw one get caught in another type of device, but that was not adopted as a turtle excluder that was approved. And from there on, when turtle excluder devices were required by the fishery, we as agents and specialists got to teach the fishermen to use the devices and help them reduce any of their losses of their catch. And we still do that. And it really pays off because they appreciate that, because these devices do lose some shrimp. And another project that I'm working on in bycatch is reducing fish bycatch. And we have 2 devices right now that I'm aware of. And one of them is a simple one called the fish eye. And it's placed on the net, on top of the net, toward the back of the net, behind the turtle excluder device, and it lets fish go. What's interesting is we put some video cameras on that device. In the University of Georgia sent one of their research vessel over, their Sea Grant vessel called the Georgia Bulldog, and we saw dolphins utilizing the fish excluder devices as feeding stations. They would go up to the device and wait for usually a red snapper to come out and grab the red snapper. And it was extremely interesting. So we're trying to develop more efficient devices because these do lose shrimp. And that's one of my favorite things, is working on bycatch through the years.
Absolutely. That's awesome. They're all all great projects. So, going through with every project, there's always challenges. With every job, there's always challenges. What's a challenge that you faced in your work with Sea Grant, and how did you manage to overcome it?
Well, it's probably several challenges, but one of the biggest ones that I encountered is because you're working so closely with people from different communities. In this case, fishermen, for instance, they have a big distrust of government, and so it's difficult to get your foot in the door until you earn their trust, really. And that's part of what being in Sea Grant Extension is about, is being a neutral broker and working with these communities closely. And basically, when you tell them you're going to do something, you keep your word and you do it, and you don't talk bad about the other fishermen. And believe me, I mean, that all gets out if you do. I never did it, but it's just learning some of that trust. And I'll never forget one of the first times I ever went down to the dock. This is in Louisiana, and they were a pretty rough group of people. I always tell the story, that was my first job. Was the job in Louisiana was the first time I had my life threatened, and that's the truth. But I, looking at my coworkers that were wearing nicely dressed in the office, that I decided I was going to go down and work with the fishermen. And it was during mullet season, strike net season on mullet, where they take the roe, the eggs, and they sell it, or we're selling it overseas, and very lucrative for the fishermen that could catch them. And I went down with a coat and tie on, and Tony would probably laugh about that. He is laughing. I see you, Tony. And I got zero reception. I was talking to them, trying to introduce myself to them, and they were just ignoring me, sorting fish. And I thought to myself, that's not really working. But I didn't get the sort of guidance I needed from my coworkers to really tell me what I was going to deal with. But that's a great learning experience, right? So the next dock I went to, I got rid of my coat and took my tie off, and they were a little more receptive. They talked to me, but when they're sorting fish, they were pitching the fish in the water and splashing me. I'm sure they were laughing about it afterwards. And then the third dock I went to was to where I just took everything off, unbuttoned my shirt, got in there, started working, helping them sort fish, asking them questions, and the reception was a lot better. So unbeknownst to me, there's already word out that I was an enforcement agent, and like I said, they don't really trust you until they get to know you. But that was a big challenge to overcome that. And then, of course, when you're working with children, you have to earn the trust of the parents as well. And so I think trust and building that was one of the biggest challenges that I encountered, at least initially in my career. And after that, once you learn how to go over those hurdles or around them or under them, then it became a lot easier. Passing on to you, Julie.
Thanks, John. Well, I think what John said is really true. The developing the trust and the connections with people it takes time, and you have to kind of sometimes meet the person or the group where they are, and sometimes you don't really know that, and that is hard. I know for me, working with the Master Naturalist volunteers, oftentimes it's me letting go of and letting them take ownership of a project, and recognizing that it might not be done exactly the way that I might have planned it out or decided to do it, but it will probably be done better because I let go and let other people have ownership of the project. And that's trust. They are, trusting other people to, to follow through and implement. And I have to say, for me, it's been those projects have turned out a lot better because I let go and because other people took ownership of the projects. But it is, like John said, I think trust, because we really are very much a people organization, and our job is to help people have better lives connected to the marine environment. And you have to develop that trust with people for them to want to be a part of it and follow you. And I think Sea Grant really, because we are so science-based and we are an even broker with people, we provide the science. And I think that's one of the that's the fast way for us to get to people trusting us and working with us, and being part of the projects that we're implementing. So that's it for me. Thanks.
I guess I'll finish it up.
Yep.
Julie mentioned trust, and I learned a big lesson when we had, I guess, the second red tide that I'd seen down here. We had a big one in 1986 that covered the whole coast. And we just looked at it and just looked at the dead fish. And Texas Parks and Wildlife, they were overwhelmed with trying to count the numbers of fish that were washing up. And people wanted to know where the red tide was, what was the strength of the aerosol that it produced. And we didn't have any answers to it. So what we did during the next red tide, and I think it was the early 1990s, or maybe it was the late 80s, probably the early 90s, we had a red tide come in, and I partnered with the University of Texas at Brownsville Coastal Studies Lab. And I might mention, partners are a big thing for us. We have innumerable partners, but we have some that are, I guess, pillars of partnership. And one of them is the Coastal Studies Lab down here. And a gentleman by the name of Don Hockaday said, hey, let's see if we can count these cells and determine the strength of the bloom. So what we did is we utilized some of our volunteers, and we asked them to go out and collect samples. And boy, did they collect samples. They had plastic bags, and they would go out and they would bring in these plastic bags, and we filled up all of the sinks at the Coastal Studies Lab with samples. We could not keep up with counting all of the samples and determining the strength of the red tide. So we said, we got to do something else. So we decided we would trust our volunteers and teach them to count the cells and determine what the strength of the aerosol was, so that we could tell Parks and Wildlife, who would put it out as information. And it worked. We formed a group called the Red Tide Rangers. We have a secret handshake and a song, and I'm not going to sing it because I can't sing very well anymore, but if anybody wants to know, I'll do it for you personally. And we've had well over 200 people take our Red Tide Ranger training, but only a few of them still stick with it. And it's great that they can respond to a red tide. The thing was, we don't have red tides every year. So the people, our volunteers, we trusted them to do that, but they wouldn't keep up with it, and they would drift away. They would start drinking and just forget about anything to do with when we had a red tide. So we had to give them something else. And I mentioned the Texas Coastal Naturalist program. So we gave them other volunteer opportunities. We trusted them again. And so they've gone out, they've saved turtles, they've saved pelicans, they've helped rescue marine mammals during strandings, whales, dolphins, you name it. We haven't had any seals though, thank goodness. But it's I guess trust is a big thing, and partnerships. Those are the two things that I've learned through time.
That's great. I may have to have you teach me the handshake if it's not too exclusive.
It's a secret
But,
handshake.
dang it. But that's fantastic. Definitely trust on all aspects is a huge thing. Moving on, next question. How has your work changed over the years, and kind of just in general ways? In what way has your work changed over the years?
That's an interesting question. I didn't even write anything down because I think it's changed quite a bit. You know, when early in my career, Tony mentioned Bycatch. I had a chance to actually work and determine what they call bycatch characterization for Matagorda Bay. It's probably one of the first bycatch studies done in that bay system, and I had cooperators, bay shrimpers that I worked with, actually go on their boat and get samples from them, which, by the way, was controversial because no one knew how the outcome of that study was going to be. And there was concern that, you know, initially it was something like 10 pounds to 1 pound, 10 pounds of bycatch to 1 pound of shrimp. That was what a lot of the information was. Well, but they had trust in me to go out and do it. And oh man, we sorted through 25-pound subsamples of their catch. And I did that, almost 3 times a week. But eventually a graduate student got involved, and it became her master's thesis, and she took over the study, and we went out and I introduced her to the fishermen. And it turned out that the amount of bycatch the shrimp was far different, far lower than what people expected. So that was a positive move. Those were the early days. Fast forwarding to 2021, now I manage people. It's less hands-on. I mean, I still go out and I do educational programs, but I do it in conjunction with volunteers. And so, it's here again, letting go. It's just having faith in your volunteers, teaching them, training them, and then going out and letting them do the work for you while I'm either developing new programs or doing different things. So it has changed quite a bit. But here again, in the county I work, we don't have a lot of commercial fishing like other counties along the Texas coast. And it's a very urban county, or actually it's probably more half and half, but it's becoming vastly urbanizing very quickly. And so my role is changing, where it's becoming more not only a volunteer manager, but also looking at bigger ways to reach a broader audience that may not be as fully engaged as we'd like along the Texas coast. They have so many different things going on in a large urban area. So it's quite different. All yours, Julie.
Thanks, John. Well, I think I playing off of John and Tony, but I really think that the biggest change that for us and for me over the time is the use of volunteers. I mean, if you look at the 3 of us working with Master Naturalist volunteers, we represent probably about 850 to 900 volunteers who are out there in the field, doing work, educating, doing restoration, monitoring, all kinds of different activities that we as individuals could only be doing a very small part. So having that volunteer base, and I have to tell you, when the Master Naturalist program started, I think all of us already had full-time jobs, but this was that's one thing I think Sea Grant is really good at, is you see opportunity and you go for it and see where the project goes. And 20 years later, our master naturalist volunteers are very, very effective at doing all those activities: restoration, monitoring, educating on our natural resources and the marine environment. So that was a big shift. And like John said, whereas we used to be more involved in the hands-on, collecting the water samples, or, planting the marsh grasses, or, now a lot of the volunteers are out there in mass doing it. So I think that, and for me, I think that shows the effectiveness of Texas Sea Grant, because we have utilized a volunteer force to implement many of the projects that are important to our Texas coast and to the state of Texas. So I think that for me, that's been a big shift. And I am so glad personally that I was able to work with those volunteers and continue to work with them, because they have changed my life. And the work that I get to do. So anyway, that's it for me. It's all yours, Tony.
I can build on what John and Julie are saying. I probably had a dozen volunteers when I first started 39 years ago, and now I've got probably well over six or 800. Not all of them are active, but they're out there. And I learned one thing from a guy, and he was in charge of our Marine Extension program many years ago. His name was Ralph Rayburn. I think, Elaine, you're on. And he told me that we are catalysts, that we just start things and you trust people and they take it over. And I'm getting a little emotional because I learned a really good lesson from that man. And I think I'll stop right there because they said it all, John and Julie. And things just have gotten so intense because of all the work they do. Finding time to just report on it. I'm so behind in all my reports all the time because of it. Julie's got a good thing going because she gets her people to report. I need to train mine to do that. But over the years, I've seen the changes that we've made, and it truly is amazing. I see new agents come in, new people coming in, and they don't see that yet, but they will. The more time you spend on it, it really is just moving and earth-shaking. The work that we've done really makes a difference, and that's it.
Very well said. So going to the last question we have for panelists, and if there's a question that any of the attendees have that we didn't cover, leave it in the chat. We'll try to get to it at the end. But before we go on to the photos and everything, what is y'all's favorite part about working with Texas Sea Grant?
Well, there's, gosh. So I guess two main points for me. One, it's working with people, our clientele that we're charged with working with, and then more importantly, making a difference in their life. So, showing them a different way and working with them until they see the path, that it's a better path. That's not always easy, and you don't always have 100% success, but has been the payoff for me. I've always said that, the extension work, Sea Grant or with AgriLife Extension is a more of a vocation than a job, and people that see it as a job tend not to be around more than a couple of years. But going back, staying with the people theme, just, I didn't touch on any of the stuff where, I've worked with Tony to do youth programs in his part of the world. I've worked with Julie to do things. I've worked with other agents up and down the coast. And, you know, it's that network. And it's knowing that you can reach out across the Sea Grant network across the nation and you know, get the answer to a question that your clientele may have, or just get information. And so it's you're always learning and always evolving and always growing. And that's, to me, is one of the best things about working for Sea Grant. It's just this huge network of people, and they're all willing to help. I've yet to ever have someone tell me that they're too busy to help me out when I asked a question or needed help. Julie, all yours.
Okay, thanks, John. Yeah, I have to agree with John again. It is the people, and I also think that for me, what's really exciting is to be a part of the research and the science that's happening, and to be able to share that with the communities and the people that we work with. You know, Sea Grant, you know, it gives you this, it opens doors so that when whether, you know, it be a professor or a researcher or a partner, you know, because you're associated with Sea Grant and the all that means for partners, especially, it just opens doors, and so you get to be involved in groundbreaking, you know, information, and you know, and that's exciting, you know, to be involved in the science, and then to share the results of that science with people in the community. I mean, I just, to me, that is so rewarding. I may not always understand it, but I try to get to the point where I can understand enough to share it with somebody else and get them excited about it. Because I think people always want to know about what's new happening in the marine world. And when you get to share that with people, I mean, you can see the lights, you know, sparkling, and, you know, their ideas popping up, and wanting to know more. And that connecting the people that we get to work with, and those that we don't get to work with, but those that our volunteers get to work with the science, is just, to me, so exciting. I see that a lot with the kids I work with the National Ocean Science School. You know, you see the light bulbs go off with them a whole lot. When all of a sudden, you know, they come from Arkansas and they've never been to the coast, and you take them and they are pulling a net through the water, or using a refractometer to determine salinity. You know, I mean, you see the sparks, and to me, that is just fabulous. So that's it. All right, Tony, it's all yours.
Julie and John couldn't have said it better. The science is the whole base for everything that we do. And one of the things I learned early on was, if you get asked a question about something, Julie mentioned the network, maybe John mentioned it too, you can say, I don't know, but I can find out. And we usually do find out, because there are so many people out there that in our network. And I find that as time goes by, there are just so many people. We become the go-to person. I am down here in the valley. People call and ask me questions, things I don't know anything about. And I will say, I don't know. And I'll call someone. I'll call Julie. I'll call John. And we can find out. Our specialists, our researchers, other people in the network. It's just amazing, the work that we do over the years. And I'll stop there.
It is amazing. It's fantastic, y'all. All right, so I am going to share the pictures that we have. So we have one picture for each extension agent. And basically, whenever I do share them, if whoever's in the photo, we'll just explain maybe what was going on when the picture was taken, a little context, we'll kind of go from there. So let me do that really fast.
Oh, good. You didn't get me with my leg showing. That picture was because here again, we didn't really mention it, but that was at our hurricane awareness conference in Matagorda County that, well, I guess I have to take credit for getting that kick started up and working with the committee to do that. And what I'm doing is I was able to acquire some donations of MREs and meals ready to eat, and was warming them up and serving them to the public as they stopped by the Sea Grant booth. So, and that's my coworker, Barbara Sulak, has since retired, but we're doing a drawing for a bug out kit. I guess it's a 3-day emergency pack to grab and go because, you know, we are in a hurricane zone. But that's what I'm doing in that picture. Handing out freebies.
Were any of the MREs good?
Oh yeah, I liked them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I found them to be very, very tasty. So, but that's, you know, that's just showing people. Of course, we had speakers. That's just one picture, but that was a fun time, and it's kind of fun to start something and watch it grow over the years. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think next up is Julie. Let's see if I can get it to go. Yes.
Oh. That was my potty training boaters on Galveston Bay. And we found when we were working with people is that a lot of people had on the boats, they may not have had fully functioning, systems, but they almost always had like porta potties. And the marina said, we don't really have a problem with, needing pump outs, but we do have a problem with the porta potty option that many boats have, because, they would dispose of the waste in the toilets at the dock, and then it would overflow. So we installed a porta potty dump station. And so the idea was you could just, take the waste and pour it into the little, the toilet, and you could turn the water on and it would go straight into the sewer line. And there are all kinds of funny things that happen when you have jobs like we have. But I came to the office one day, and so the porta potty dump station used to be on the ground because it was very convenient to pour. And I came to the office, and one of the marinas had called me, and they said, "We have a problem, Julie, with a porta potty dump station." I was like, "Okay, is the water not working? What's going on?" And so this is going down for history, that there was inappropriate use by boaters after too many margaritas on Saturday night. So we had to elevate the porta potty dump station to the height that you see, so to reduce inappropriate use of the dump station. And so anyway, you just never know what you're going to encounter as a job as a Sea Grant Marine agent, but it's always interesting and fun. So anyway, that's what that picture's about.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. It's much better than I think any of our guesses when we found the photo. So it works perfect. All right. And then last up is Tony.
I'm trying to figure out what I was doing there. Now I remember. Sea Grant, I think Dr. Plotkin sent a photographer down to the valley, and he got creative and just wanted to see what we could do. And I love pith helmets, especially when I'm working on boats. They're some of the coolest things, until I found straw from Mexico, and it's a lot cheaper than a pith helmet. And I think that one has gone by the wayside. But I was just looking at, just posing for the photographer, Seth Patterson. And that's it. I would like to say one thing. I was like the Lone Ranger down here for many, well over 30 something years. And Sea Grant sent me a coworker, Kate DeGennaro. Kate, I don't know if you're on, but whenever I do something, whenever I have a program, I invite her and she participates in it and she gets involved. And that has been quite a change for me because of so many years of working by myself. It's really good to have someone there as a backup too. And that's it.
Absolutely. And yes, Kate, if you're on, we appreciate everything you do for Texas Sea Grant as well. Well, great. I'm going to check really fast. I don't see any other questions popping up. So I think we can wrap this Seaside chat up. Thank you for all of our panelists for taking the time out of your very busy days to kind of talk about all things Texas Sea Grant. And happy birthday us. Happy 50th to Texas Sea Grant.
Happy birthday.
All right, y'all. Well, everybody take care. And thank you again.
Thank you for organizing it.
Absolutely. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Great job.